This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put South at the center. I am Dhanya Rajendran, your host. In the Bengaluru studio, it's Pooja Prasanna and me on this side. Pooja, reporting head of the News Minute and anchor of Let Me Explain. How's your week been?
I have been going down a rabbit hole of cow vigilantism because that's what I'm discussing in Let Me Explain. So not a great start for the week, but we still have 3 days left.
And we have on the other side of the studio, Nandini Chandrasekhar, senior journalist with the News Minute. Nandini, how's your week been?
A bit stressful. Started off on a good note a week ago, but then the stampede happened and it's all that we've been working on. So yeah, let's see. It's a hectic week.
Okay, so we are hoping that Leena Raghunath will join us. I think it's raining heavily in Kerala or something, but she's not here yet. I'm going to experiment slightly with a new format today. We will, of course, go through the headlines with Pooja. We will then briefly discuss the Chinnaswamy stampede, where every entity is now blaming each other. Singer Chinmay will be joining us. We have quite a lot to discuss with her. Last week, I asked all of you, what does rupees 500 in a week mean to you? And I told you that rupees 500 a week means a lot to us because that's the amount that you have to pay every month to get a subscription of the News Minute and News Laundry. Adding a handful of subscribers every day actually means a lot to our newsroom. Some of you listened to my request, you became subscribers. I hope more of you do that this week. And for those interested, you can click on the link in the description, whether you are in India or outside India, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And before we go to the headlines, I'm excited to announce that we're going to have our first joint subscriber meet of the News Minute and News Laundry in Chennai on the 18th of June. It's our first joint subscriber meet. It's an evening where you can discuss news, your questions about the news environment. In this meeting, of course, our bureau chief of Tamil Nadu, Shabir Ahmed, will be there. Also, News Laundry's executive editor, Jayashree, who's very familiar for most of you if you watch Hafta, and Chitranshu Tiwari, who heads products at News Laundry. He's won many awards for the kind of things that they have been innovating at News Laundry. So don't forget, the event is on the 18th of June. And you have to be a subscriber to attend. So you can become a subscriber. And if you are, write to subscriptions@thenewsminute.com. Subscriptions@thenewsminute.com. Okay, as I finish my announcement, I can see that Leena Raghunath is there online. Leena, hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, Dhanya.
Okay, Pooja, headlines.
We start with Karnataka. Karnataka to redo caste survey. BJP calls it a move to divert attention from the stampede. But we had reported this in our Power Trip, which is a weekly political newsletter, in April. And we had said that the state government was likely to cave into pressure from Vokkaligas and Lingayats for a recount. The two communities have consistently been claiming that their communities were undercounted.
So this recount, we are not yet sure how it's going to be done. I spoke to a few ministers in the morning. They said there's a cabinet meeting on Friday and then they will decide. But most probably it's not a full recount, but it is just like you will publish the voter list saying this are the names on the census. If your name is not there, it's missing or there's something wrong, then you can come and do a recalibration. That is what some people are saying will happen. It won't be a full recount.
But politically speaking, it's a huge climb down for Siddaramaiah. He had insisted on not giving into a climb down, but it looks like the other forces within his own cabinet have prevailed upon him. Andhra Pradesh journalist held for controversial remarks on his news show sent to judicial custody. Senior journalist Kommineni Srinivas Rao was arrested after another journalist, VVR Krishnam Raju, referred to Amravati as the capital of sex workers on YSRCP's mouthpiece, which is Sakshi TV.
So there's been a lot of discussion again as to, is this really journalism when you say something like this on a show? I don't know if it is a live show or not because all the clips have been removed and I don't know if this journalist opposed enough. But yes, arresting someone for a comment made by somebody else on a news show is definitely problematic.
But to me, this also reopens the conversation on whether political parties should run news organizations, quote unquote. Shipwreck off Kerala, CPIM and BJP go soft on shipping company with links to Adani. this is an interesting turn of events where the CPIM and BJP come together. Dhanya, you have been following this quite closely.
Yeah, so the shipwreck happened, the ship sunk actually a few days ago. They were not even giving the list of what was the cargo. For example, it was said that there were hazardous chemicals that was not known. I think Malayalam Manorama finally reported that there was a high-level meeting where the chief secretary said there should not be a criminal case filed against this company called Mediterranean Shipping Company. It's headquartered in Switzerland. Why? Of course, they don't make it clear. They don't want a criminal case against the company, but this company is partner with Adani Group, which of course runs the Vizhinjam port in Kerala. So I guess neither the CPIM nor the BJP wants to piss off Adani.
Tamil Nadu police reshuffle, 18 officers transferred, suspended DIG reinstated in coastal security. This is a major reshuffle within the Tamil Nadu police. The state government issued transfer and posting orders for 18 officers, including several IPS officers, while promoting 3 to higher ranks. Now moving to Telangana, KCR deposes before Ghosh Commission, quizzed about Kaleshwaram project redesign and funds. Former Chief Minister of Telangana and the BRS President K. Chandrasekhar Rao on Wednesday deposed before the PC Ghosh Commission, which is probing the alleged irregularities in the Kaleshwaram lift irrigation project. Last week we discussed that his daughter Kavita was staging a protest.
So Harish Rao, who was a minister in the cabinet, has also deposed before the commission. And he said that it's because Maharashtra was not allowing certain projects that they had to come up with this barrage. Now, what I want to say here is something a little different. We had done an investigation a few years ago about this company MEIL, which is Mega Engineering, which had some of these irrigation projects. And we had done a story about how allegedly a company floated by Mega had paid the wedding of an IAS officer's daughter, which was held at the Taj Falaknuma in Hyderabad. We are continuing to face at least 3 litigations, which defamation cases. But one good thing is that Telangana High Court has lifted an injunction on us and some other news organizations which had aggregated our copy, saying that we can continue to report on MEIL because we had an injunction not to report on them. So, and the order is a pretty strong one, saying that you cannot stop the media from reporting.
Which is why we can even mention this in a podcast today, right? Prime Minister Modi meets Shashi Tharoor and other MPs of Operation Sindoor delegations, and they said that we are all very proud. The visuals were quite amusing, the kind of bonhomie that we saw.
Yeah, we can't differentiate who is BJP and opposition because everybody's language has been the same, right? Nandini, you've also been following these tweets of all the MPs.
A lot of them, we didn't know where they were going and where the plan, but they seem to be meeting. There's a lot of cheer. There's a lot of social media coverage. They're all being very prompt, who they are meeting, what they are saying. They're also in the midst of it also be managing to meet the diaspora as well. I don't know if that was part of the schedule, but they are doing it anyway.
I think they are meeting the
But yes,
diaspora quite a bit.
quite a bit. And if you see some of the leaders when they're speaking to the media, there are multiple members belonging to different parties. So it's not one person taking the stage as well. So yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to OIC just to ask him how the trip went. And he said that we have done our duty of putting across India's point. Now it's up to the MEA to push that point with all the countries.
Yeah, he's right, because it can't be a one-off sort of an event, right? That the government has to take this forward. The conversation has to be continuous. Moving back to Karnataka, police suspensions over stampede trigger cold war between IAS, IPS officers in Karnataka. The state government's decision to suspend 5 police officers, including 3 senior IPS officers in connection with the June 4 Chinnaswamy Stadium stampede, which claimed 11 lives during the RCB victory parade, has triggered a major cold war. Just a bit of context to this, Dhanya. Now, the conversation within both the associations is that the chief secretary, she was responsible, Shalini Rajneesh, was responsible for a lot of decisions that were taken. But she has not been transferred, she's not been suspended. And in fact, the governor who attended the ceremony in front of Vidhan Sauda was also invited by Shalini Rajneesh, who's a CS. Now, of course, who instructed her is a different conversation. Formally, the invite went from her office. So the questions being asked is, why are the police being made scapegoats? Why is there no action on DPAR officials and the CS herself?
So one thing I'm a little surprised is a take of the state government that they had nothing to do with the event at the Vidhana Sauda. Now, just to jog everybody's memory, there were 2 different events. The first one was at the Secretariat, which is called the Vidhana Saudha, and the second one was at the Chinnaswamy Stadium. It is at the stadium where this stampede happened and 11 people lost their lives. But let's not forget that a population also walked along with the players who were in the bus from the Vidhan Saudha to the Chinnaswamy Stadium. That is how the crowd really surged, right? Now, initially the government was saying that yes, we had done the function at Vidhan Saudha, but we have nothing to do with what happened in Chinnaswamy Stadium. Now, surprisingly, the government is distancing itself even from what happened in the Secretariat, right? And Nandini, there are multiple FIRs and multiple cases now.
Yeah. So there are 3 FIRs. If you remember, there was an FIR immediately filed by the Cubbon Park sub-inspector. It was a Sovagmoto case taken. Then subsequently, there were 2 more FIRs lodged. These were by the two injured people. There was 56 injured, as we know. All of them accusing, the state, holding the state government, the police, then, the KSCA, then the DNA networks, all of these people responsible for act of endangering public safety.
KSA is a cricket
KSA,
association and
that's the
DNA is
cricket
a private
association.
organization.
DNA Network Entertainment, they hold all the public events for RCB. So even RCB is made a party to it. So now all of them have approached the court challenging the FIR filed against them, saying that each one is passing the buck. Nobody wants to say they are responsible. Everybody is saying that, the other person approved, we had approval, this person was okay, this person was in the no. So it's right now going around. They're all arguing. But eventually, I feel some amount of responsibility will fall on the police. A lot of these people are gunning for the police. Like, for example, DNA Entertainment is clearly blaming the police, saying that, hey, you guys were not able to manage the crowd outside. You were right there with us. You were right there with us in the control room. Then you go file an FIR against us, but you have to. But even otherwise, I think whoever has the upper hand in this, some part of the blame will fall on the police, because let's not forget that ultimately it is the responsibility of the police to control crowds. Not all crowds come with oral permission, verbal permission, anything. So it is a fundamental law and order situation. And that is the responsibility of the police. So I know there has been a lot of support extended to the policemen who have been suspended, including the commissioner. But I don't think they can escape complete scrutiny.
No, so that's what I'm saying. Now we are at a point where everybody is disassociating themselves with who organized this, right?
Yeah.
While the question should be, okay, all of you guys organized this together and you've all goofed it up together. The Cricket Association, which controls the stadium, did not decide how many gates to open. The police did not figure out how to do the bandobast. The government should have said no to at least one of the events from the beginning itself. Now, instead of pinpointing whose failure was it to control crowds or to lessen crowds, we are all now saying, hey, we didn't even organize it.
And just how funny things turn around at the beginning of, I think on the morning of June 4th, everybody wanted their faces on this event. And now just people are throwing their hands up. For me, what Siddaramaiah has said about him not even knowing about the Chinnaswamy Stadium event and saying that I was just invited, even governor was coming, which is why I came. I think that's appalling as the chief minister. You cannot just disassociate yourself and your office from it. It's either negligence or complete incompetence on your part. If you did not know that such a big event was being held, then one of the two is true in your case. He's also gone on to say that he did not know of the deaths at least for 2 hours. So there are some questions that he needs to answer if that is true.
And it's a far cry from the reaction of the government in the initial 2 days. They were very, in fact, ministers have apologized for the event. They said this shouldn't have happened. There was a lot of distress. But as it happens, right, as the FIRs happened and as the other accused people ran to court, the narrative changed entirely. Now somebody else is responsible, KSA is responsible, RCB is responsible, DNA is responsible, and even the police. And again, like you discussed earlier, there has been no action taken against the IS officer. So that itself is another thing, thinking that the government is sheltering them as against the police officers who they feel were hung out to dry. So it is not the uniform set of rules.
Yeah,
that
but
are-
I thought, I understand people had a lot of sympathy saying why was Dayanand made a scapegoat. But when we had more conversations, we realized that the police had, multiple lapses from their part.
So
Correct.
actually, Pooja spoke about Power Trip, our newsletter. I'm strongly telling all of you, you have to read Power Trip every Tuesday, because in April, we told you there is going to be a recount of the caste survey. And today, in June, that has come true. It is Times of India and the Hindu and everybody's front page. Now, we have written yesterday as to why the police commissioner was actually transferred. Now, all of us think that it is because of the fact that he was careless about doing the bandobast, etc.
Which is true.
That's also there, but that's not the only reason. Another reason we are being told is that the commissioner spoke to a few journalists, like he had a small chat with them, in which he sort of said that, see, the CM also knew this is happening. It is not just on me. And one of the journalists relayed this to Chief Minister, who got very upset with it. Actually, one interesting bite I was watching today was DK Shivkumar was asked, do you want to buy RCB? And he says, I am just a member of Karnataka, Cricket Association for a long time. I don't have the time to buy RCB, and I don't even drink Royal Challengers. I was like, do you buy RCB to drink Royal Challengers? Leena, have you been looking at the coverage of this entire thing and what's been happening?
Yep. As I pointed out in our last podcast itself, I think I foresaw sort of the blame coming on the police first, because one of the points we discussed is that planning such a victory march and such a celebration in a big city like Bangalore needed much more time and planning. And I think that at least a day of planning and figuring out the routes and victory march should have been given for the police to sort of figure what to do and how to plan things. Whereas I think from what I have seen unfolding on those days, I think the police and their view of how to crowd control was not taken on board by neither the Cricketing Association nor the government fully. And now they are being made a scapegoat, which I think is quite an unfair situation to be in.
See, that's the impression from outside, right? That it is being unfair to the police. While we are saying is that everybody has to take the buck, especially the police, because at the end of the day, tomorrow 10 lakh people can come on the road because there is a UFO which has come and hit. Are you going to say, I was just caught off guard? Your job is to make sure that the bandobast is
and
done.
it's not like they were completely unaware. In fact, a letter was leaked, right? That we all reported on, that the DCP of Vidhan Sabha Security did say that lakhs of people were going to arrive. In fact, the day
That is one day
after
before the match.
stampede, when I spoke to these police officers, they expressed shock. In fact, the same night when I spoke to them, they said, "Oh, we didn't expect it. We didn't expect this." I'm sorry, a standard RCB fan will tell you that we are going to rush. I'm an RCB fan, and yes, I was planning to walk up there and see, let me even check out the crowd. So people just had plans to come, maybe not approach, but we were all gathering. It was known, and the police had managed crowds in so many parts of the city the previous night. Celebrations were going on and on till about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, early 4 o'clock. So they knew people were still high on that. And imagine people in this mood when they hear that the team is going to come to town right the next day. Yes, they are going to come.
I was saying, somebody I spoke to used the term that the letter that police wrote saying that we can't manage was just an anticipatory bail. And they do that ahead of any big event. It is not unique to this celebration. But they knew 6,000 people had gathered outside Chinnaswamy the previous night without a team, without any celebration. So they were not prepared on multiple counts. We have given this in great detail in Power Trip. So do sign up and read Power Trip.
I can already foresee people writing letters to me saying that Danya's UFO comparison was not right. Yes, that is true. But I'm going to read out a lot of letters after our segment with Chinmayi. I'm going to be reading out letters because every episode I keep a stack of letters and I cannot read it because we run out of time. That's why we're having a small discussion on the stampede, which comes to an end now. And now we will go across to Chinmayi. So this week on South Central, we are joined by Chinmayi Sripada, one of South India's most versatile and outspoken voices. She's a celebrated playback singer, a dubbing artist, entrepreneur, and activist. She's the voice behind many unforgettable songs in Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, and Hindi. And she's the voice of actors like Samantha and Trisha. So she's basically shaped how we have experienced cinema. But Chinmayi is much more than artistry. She is one of the first and few women in the Tamil film industry to call out sexual harassment publicly. In 2018, at the height of the Me Too movement, Chinmayi accused lyricist Vairamuthu of sexual harassment. And this move came at a very high professional and personal cost. She has faced an unofficial ban from the Tamil film industry and from the Tamil dubbing industry. We'll come to that later. But something has shifted, and after years of being quietly pushed out of the industry, Chinmayi is now everywhere again. You go to YouTube, Twitter, she's all over. Everybody's interviewing her. Thanks to the song Muttamare, which she sang for Thug Life. Her voice has struck a deep and emotional chord with people, and they're suddenly realizing what they missed over the years. They are now questioning the Tamil film industry that how did you keep such a talent out? Official or unofficial ban, how can you not make Chinmayi sing? That's the question that people are asking. And surprisingly, a lot of people in the industry have come out. I can't say a lot, but a handful of people in the industry too have come out and spoken for Chinmayi. Chinmayi, thank you for joining us here at South Central. I know that it's a busy week for you because you're almost on every platform giving interviews.
No, it's not true. I'm not on every platform, but probably I'm singing, and that finally, for a change, I mean, people can remember that I sing, and it makes me happy. I'm like, it's not just one, to be remembered for the songs, and then they are now, speaking about all the older songs that I sang. So it's nice. It's nice to be here. I mean, after 6-7 years of abuse. So this is good.
But did you see this coming? I think there was one more cycle before this, right? When there was a lot of outpouring of love. I remember during a pandemic when you had done the Twitter spaces, just singing and singing and singing.
That, yes, I think we just planned it like a 1 maximum 2 hour Twitter spaces, and then it became like an all-nighter. We were doing it until some 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. And I remember a couple of people were saying, "Romba late ayiduchu." I think it's the crows. Everybody is up. It's all sunrise has happened. So I think it's time that we should let her go. Yes. So I remember, it was trending on Twitter and an all India level. A lot of people were talking about it, and then there's Bring Back Chinmayi and everything happened. There was a lot of love even then. After this, I think to be, especially after the success of something as amazing as 96, because I remember the adulation that came when Govind Vasanta's violins would play on the trailer, and then we sang Kadale Kadale, and there was so much pressure from everybody in the industry and outside it to create a song which was not in the plan at all. And Govind Vasanta went back and created a song, and we went and sang it a few days before the release of the film. And then after that, most definitely the Twitter spaces. And now, honestly, this is really very strange, because I was just standing in for Dee, who was not able to make it that day. Just like anybody else would do it at Rahman Sir's audio launch. It's happened a few times before. This is not the first time as well. But I guess it's just, I don't know if the stars aligned or what aligned, but it just blew up, and it was lovely to see a lot of people appreciate me for singing. Of course, I think it took a little bit of a, it became a little bit of a, I think I was very uncomfortable seeing all this Dee versus Chinmayi sort of an argument. That was really, really uncomfortable for me. I was literally squirming, but thankfully that has died down. And for all the love and all this adulation, I'm really, really grateful.
Now, after facing a ban for so many years, now we have seen some people come out and give interviews. In fact, some of them are saying that Vairamuthu is a great poet, but he's a terrible human being even. How do you view all these things now?
She's talking about the Gangai Amaran interview. Gangai Amaran is Ilayaraja's brother and the music composer himself.
That was really so how the man also has a very interesting way of speaking and communicating, and his whatever he says is laced with a lot of sarcasm. So it took me a little while to understand where he was going with it when he started it. So I was just sitting there like, okay, where is this going? What am I supposed to do? And I think out of discomfort, initially I started laughing and, okay. And then finally he did say that, he is a great poet and all of that, but not a good human being. So, yeah, I'm glad. I mean, because this man has been an open secret. It's not as if people don't know. What I said wasn't news to anybody. Everybody knows about it. What's new, sort of a thing. You're expected to avoid and then find your way and just get away and do your own thing and avoid yourself being in very uncomfortable situations. So yeah, this is new plus interesting to me. What Gangai Amaran sir said, but looks like a lot of people have started talking about that as well. And it's the one thing that I have been trying to say as well is that overall in the past 6-7 years there has been a consistent erasure of all the other women who also spoke up along with me. I was not the only one who spoke up in public. 2 other women came up and spoke in interviews facing the camera. A couple of others came on camera and said that they have seen him misbehave with a young girl, and 14-15 other accounts of harassment and abuse have been identity protected. So this entire erasure of all of these people and then making me the only person who apparently spoke up about the poet has been something I was very uncomfortable with. And the systematic erasure and completely forgetting about these other women who said that their careers are ruined. They're gone. I mean, there's a singer, Bhuvana Seshan, who said that her career was ruined because of him. She had a promising career ahead of her. And there are a couple of others who have left the country. They have settled abroad. Realize that there's no point in fighting all of this. So we need to be looking at I mean, it's good that a song like this came my way, but what if this song hadn't come, and what if I hadn't had the opportunity to showcase my talent again in an arena like this? So we are all this this love and adulation and where was she for the past 6-7 years? What happened to her? And then people digging up about the Me Too movement and the dubbing union ban, and therefore the other shadow ban, and then the ostracization by a lot of musicians and singers, because I had named or helped share the stories of a lot of other girls across the spectrum from Carnatic music to film industry. So I had made no friends during this process. Nobody really wanted to associate with me. I was Dhania would know this. I was the one that shall not be named. I was Voldemort. I still am Voldemort. I think until 12 days ago now. Now it's I guess it's even now you can very, very clearly see there'll be like an absolute silence from some sectors, and you wonder, I mean, what did I do wrong? I mean, why am I being othered and then pushed to a corner where nobody would want to associate with me, even though the ones they shouldn't be associating with are the ones who are actually making workplaces unsafe and dangerous and traumatic for so many young girls. So the exact I was not looking for praise and adulation and to be pedestalized for what I did, but I did not expect to be othered by my own fraternity and be called names and not be touched or spoken of or be associated with in concerts or songs or recordings. So this sort of a shadow ban that has
also existed in general has been saddening to me. But now there is a lot of there are some people who are saying it looks like the News Minute also wrote about it. Add some curry leaves on Instagram had written about it. This is systemic patriarchy of. I've been speaking about this for so many years, and there have been people who really, really wish me only well and only love me. They have said, okay, enough, don't keep talking about this. People also need to remember that you're a singer, you're an artist. People have forgotten that. So now I didn't know how to make people remember that I'm a singer. For me, being a singer is as much a part of my identity as my name, which is Chinmayi. And I said, okay, now what do I do? Should I, from the beginning, sing and dance in a very different manner? How should I remind people? But then suddenly, I think this Muthamalai's performance, my cover version, kind of reminded people that, hey, I'm a singer too. And then a couple of interviews where they focused on the fact that I can sing. And I was just telling somebody that, initially none of this was sinking into me. And I was just watching all of this, all the 7 years of constantly going to court, and then having so many things happen during the court proceedings, and then go through abuse on so many social media, YouTube channels where the women from the dubbing union also would be abusing me, calling me, if you're getting abused here, if you are claiming to be abused here, why are you working here? Go and work as a house help in some 10 houses. And as if house help don't get molested and all of that. I mean they were tone deaf anyway. But from there to this, I was just watching, and initially there was a lot of tears. I was crying and I was sobbing a lot, and I didn't know how to process it. And then I was just watching all of this like a movie. Somewhere I think I had become very numb to a lot of this. I was just watching and I was like, yeah, okay, I mean, wherever yeah. So is this one is it leading me to a space of exhilaration and joy? No, I'm not there, but I'm truly, there is gratitude and gratefulness, I mean, of course, same word, for that time has given me, or time has again said and shown that, hey, I'm a singer. There have been because they have completely erased that aspect of what I do, and that's usually what they do with all women and trans people that come and speak up. Their erasure of what they otherwise do, their talents, their everything else. Then suddenly it's only about controversy, problem, shouting, fighting, anger, rage, and it's almost as if only these words and these adjectives will be attached, and then everything with regard to our talent and what we otherwise do. There'll be people who will be like, you have a sense of humor, you joke and laugh. I'm like, okay, I mean, what do you think I'm doing? Like 24/7 raging and outraging and shouting and so yeah, I had an anchor, I think a few months ago, she'd interviewed me for some Navaratri something. She said, ma'am, you're joking and all. I'm like, yeah, what do you expect me to do? I mean, so this entire idea that is created about, somebody like me, and it's so tiring. So all of these, there was this one time that I think in another South Central, Dhanya was interviewing me, and I think Parvati was also there. I think that day I felt so defeated, and I think somewhere through my voice or something, Dhanya got to know, and then she messaged me later asking if I was okay. There have been times, I think, that I have genuinely prayed, like, hey, I'm done with this. Please, God, take me. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. We constantly going through this hate. I mean, constant hate. And even if you switch off social media, outside there is. I'm like, oh my God, I'm done. Can I just get done with this and then maybe have another life, sort of a thing? But yeah, I guess things weren't as bad. Things did change around. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack from what Chinmayi said, but I want to come to Leena. A couple of things, Chinmayi. Actually, it's really good that you pointed out you are not the only person. In fact, yesterday, when we put out the story of Gangai Amaran supporting Chinmayi, what Chinmayi was saying in the beginning, which if people did not understand, is that Gangai Amaran was very sarcastic in the interview saying, அவங்க என்னோட friend வைரமுத்து ஆனா அவங்க பத்தி பேச முடியாதா? So he's asking a sarcastic way that can I not be critical of Vairamuthu, though he's my good friend and though he's a great poet. But it was the channel had edited the interview in such a way, the montage, that is very difficult to understand at first. Chinmayi pointed out that it was not only her. In fact, we have interviewed Sindhuja Rajaram, who's a singer based out of the US, Bhuwana, who's in Chennai, Haima Malini, Kripa J, a journalist, has interviewed her. You should read. Kripa has actually put out her very long story on her own blog yesterday because the website she used to work with no longer exists. So just look for Kripa Ji's story on Chinmayi. Scroll had done a lot of work at that time. We have all spoken to women who said the same thing about Vairamuthu, right? But every time anybody talks about Vairamuthu, they are like, oh, Chinmayi doesn't have proof. So there is a benefit of doubt which is given to Vairamuthu. And I have to keep reminding them that, boss, that's not the situation. Yesterday, when we put out the Gangai Amaran story, I saw someone commenting saying that we will presumption of innocence for Vairamuthu. So I'm like Chinmayi, sometimes I go into this rage mode. So I went and said, that's not true. So many women have spoken out. I went back, that comment is deleted. I was like set for a fight, but it couldn't go on. But Leena, one thing I want to ask about you from what Chinmayi said, right? This erasure of what these women do, like that's something which Parvati, for example, says a lot. That most of it, and all members of WCC also, that half of them, they're just made to react on these things. That they are primarily artists, their craft is their art. They do not have the time, the luxury to do all that because they have to continuously deal with these things.
Their identity, you mean, is reduced to being a problematic person.
Or somebody who's constantly fighting.
Yeah. Most of the women who have spoken out about these incidents say that, when they came to the industry, they just wanted to act, sing, or whatever they came for and go back home and lead a very normal life, living the life of an artist, the full and complete life of an artist. But these are very honest people who are not going to shut down and stay quiet about what has happened. And they are not going to wear the cloth of an survivor that the public wants them to be. They're going to own their humanity. They're going to be full human beings while they'll constantly keep reminding that this is what the industry has done to them. This is what the abuse that has happened to them. They're not going to make it comfortable for the public, to neither to forget about their whole life as an artist, neither are they going to stay quiet about this incident. And whenever the abuser's name comes up, wherever they are worshipped, these women come out and speak up, and they are being made to pay a price for it. It's not that anybody in India needs another song from Chinmayi to remember the artist that is Chinmayi, right? Chinmayi's name and what she has built for herself as an artist, I think, is there in everyone's memory. The whole public knows about it. But it is a very few powerful handful of people that has banned her from the industry, that has, that has sort of robbed us as a public, as admirer of art, to have a singer like Chinmayi and her voice accessible to us, to be continuous. So this is a very powerful group who has stopped an artist from performing, stopped the public from enjoying the art form. And again, they are by shadow banning, and what they're trying to tell everyone is that this is the price you pay when you stop staying quiet after a point. They want you to just shut up after a point, maybe raise it, but then go back into a victim mode and live a life of whatever that becomes then convenient. But people who don't allow this kind of a convenient narrative to happen, they keep banning them. And it is a very sad reality for artists. And I think, Chinmayi, that that this is a great for anybody who looks at women's justice movement at this point in India. I think you have given us a great, case study about the kind of the long periods of abuse and ban that has come your way, and how you have you have constantly worked your way through it and refused to die out as a voice, constantly raise this again and again, whatever comes your way. And I think we have all got to be a lot thankful for the way you have done this.
Also, one of the things that, are you now happy? Are you now, there is like nothing changes. I still had to show up in court 2 days later. And then I have another court hearing in 10 days. The court is a great leveler. I mean, it will show you the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be, the legal process itself. So somewhere, a lot of women who messaged me in the past 10 days, they've been telling me that they have seen a lot of this. A lot of them are survivors themselves, speaking about sexual abuse and trauma and dealing with it especially when it's their own family and friends and circle. And for something like this, they'd like to see somebody like this also winning, right? They'd like to see success stories come out of something like this and not be pushed to the corner and say, oh, if you speak up, this is what will happen to you. Because somewhere, I want all of the women who spoke up to win and to show and be successful and say, hey, we can speak our truth and still be successful. Yes, there has been a price to pay. I'm still paying the price. My ban is still not lifted. It will take some time. Legal process will take its time. And we still don't know. I mean, as soon as I get, if at all, God willing, I get a favorable judgment, the next day there will be something else that will come from the dubbing union. God knows what, because that's how they function. And for me, at least, a lot of these women have been telling me that this feels like a personal win. That's the only word, the only line that I keep seeing again and again and again in my DMs. This feels like a personal win. And at least for that, I'm glad that there is a higher power that was watching, because the higher power got a lot of, yelling from me, like, what are you doing? What are you doing your job a lot of times? So, I think for that, definitely, overall, people, especially when in this space, need to see some successes as well. I think it's necessary for the perception. Also, even though I'm saying perception and things like that, I think because we're all constantly struggling and working against all of this in our own personal capacity in our own lives, can God cut us a break somewhere is something that will happen as well. But I'm glad something like this also happens.
Chinmay, so in the podcast also, I don't want to erase your identity as a singer. So maybe you should sing now 2 lines, so that people know that,
Okay.
people don't forget that is who you are, singer.
Which language, madam?
Any language.
तेरे बिना बेसुआदी रतियां हो सजना, तेरे बिना बेसुआदी रतियां सजना, हो रूखी रे काटो रे काटे कटे ना, तेरे बिना बेसुआदी रतियां सजना, हो दम दर मस्त दर मस्त दर दम, हो हमदम बिन तेरे क्या जीना.
Maybe one Tamil song to remind the Tamil audience one more time, refresh the memory perhaps. Maybe from your first movie, Kannathil Muttamittaal.
ஒரு தெய்வம் தந்த பூவே கண்ணில் தேடல் என்ன தாயே, வாழ்வு தொடங்கும் இடம் நீதானே, வானம் முடியும் இடம் நீதானே, காற்றை போல நீ வந்தாயே, சுவாசமாய் நீ நின்றாயே, மார்பிலூரும் உயிரே, ஒரு தெய்வம் தந்த பூவே கண்ணில் தேடல் என்ன தாயே.
Wow. I hope people remember what they've missed out on. And, somewhere I hope that this public pressure will act. It should have acted 7-8 years ago. People should have stood up and, spoken up for you, because while you were facing shadow ban and real ban, the person you and many other women accused of sexual harassment and assault, Vairamuthu, was going on with life as usual. In fact, the so-called progressive forces, including the DMK, including people like Kamal Hassan, they were happy to share stages with them. Chief Minister Stalin even went to his house on his birthday to wish him. They have felicitated him on so many occasions. So it is terrible that, even the progressive forces supposedly did not speak up for you. But now my question to you is, one, how exhausting has it been? And my second question is, do you think that now again people have been reminded and there's so much of outpour of where was Chinmayi? Do you think that will be a breakthrough, or public memory will be short-lived?
No, the breakthrough in the industry now.
Industry
again,
is what
I
I mean,
don't know actually. I in general, they say public memory is short-lived, right? I am shocked that it's probably 12 days or so since the performance. It's still trending at number 1 on YouTube. None of this. I don't know what in God's name is happening, truth be told.
And about Pooja's first part, about just how exhausting all this has been. Like, I am personally sometimes exhausted just looking at your energy. For example, to those unaware, Chinmayi doesn't just talk about Me Too movement. There was one time when she was going on putting out dowry for like Andhra and Telangana. What are the different kinds of dowry that women are taking? Women are forced to give. Their families are forced to give. Then another 2 weeks, Chinmayi will be talking about safety in some PG accommodation. Then next 2 weeks, Chinmayi will be doing some. So, but literally, how exhausting has this been? I mean, we know what has been going through court. There was, I think, one time when one of the lawyers said that you're a liar, you're a fraud. How are you saying that you know Urdu and Hindi? You don't even know these languages. All sorts of things have been happening, right?
I think that Urdu Hindi thing, it looks like I forgot, but I remember he argued saying that this woman has no character, she's a liar, she needs to go to jail, send her to jail today for perjury. And he was arguing so vehemently. I was like, oh, are they going to send me to jail after this? I mean, I saw 2 police women going to come and take me to jail because this man is arguing that I need to be sent to jail. And I was just sitting there reflecting, like, here I am speaking up, asking for my right to work against somebody like a Radha Ravi. He was an open, abusive, so verbally abusive that everybody knows about it. And look at, that's when, we what we know as the society and general public and what is argued in court with papers and documents and words and commas and periods and everything else. It's a very, very different, thing altogether. And I'm so grateful that, I have legal counsel in Suresh Sir and Nagashaila ma'am. If not for them, I think my sanity would have gone a very, very long time ago. And how many people could be as lucky like I am? I think this entire process is meant to exhaust. But when some girls reach out to me about all of this postpartum dowry is like out there. It's like literally out there. They're talking about what will you give me. It's like people say, oh, marriage is for love. Women and men should marry for love, but they're not. They have always been talking about it like business deals. Whoever gives me a better dowry, I will marry them. If that person is also fair and slim and all of that, added advantage. But wherever is the better dowry, they will go there. So yeah, a lot of people went to me. I still have so many DMs talking to me, especially in the past 10 days about, there was this girl who talks about being othered by her own family because she spoke about her uncle being a molester, and then her mother is not talking to her because apparently it's her sister's husband, and because she's now grieving the loss of the relationship with her sister. And then that other person, her cousin, saying, why are you talking normally to my uncle if he molested you? You are a liar. I'm like, oh my God, this seems like a replay of what happened to me. And I felt so sorry for that girl because her own family wasn't standing by her. And this is everyday lived reality, where people want to be normal and move on, and then after a point they no longer can tolerate it. Most people don't get it. And I mean, I don't know why and how I have this energy and why I'm wired the way I do, but yeah, it's just the way it is. I don't know how long it'll last also. But yeah, I have it in outrage.
Let's hope it lasts a very long time. I have something personal to ask you, but I'll come back to that. Leena, I want to talk about the shadow ban, then go back to Chinmay. When she says shadow ban, a lot of people will say there's nothing like that. There's no, if a ban is there, it's an official ban. But we have seen in Malayalam, right? That's not true. People can be shadow banned.
Yes, of course. We have seen how strong actors who have proven it by countless awards and hits like Reema Kallingal and Parvati Tiruvoth, how they have lost opportunities that, Parvati, how she had to come back, and Reema sort of, we see her in few art house movies or few Anjali Menon productions now. And that's all that we get to see Reema, who had given so many powerful performances. So we all know how powerful men keep inconvenient women out of the industry, right? How those work. And so far, all that women had to protect themselves was to alert the whisper network. So if there is an abuser in the industry, sort of women try to inform other women who are coming in that there is an abuser, and that, so Vairamuthu, as we all know, that there has been so many people taking the names, and almost everyone who know him admitted that this doesn't come as a shocking piece of news to them. But we can see how that has affected the life of an artist here who's amongst us now talking about it, and how these shadow bans work, like how such a strong artist voice is kept out of the industry. And we have seen the same thing happening in Kerala, whereas now Dilip, with his own production house, keeps getting movies and movies while, facing a court of law and undergoing the process. And where is the woman survivor, and where is her movies now? Nowhere to be seen, right? So this happens across industries, that inconvenient woman doesn't get opportunities, and people who wants to raise a voice and fight this fight lose out on chances.
So Chinmay, once you spoke about the shadow, I mean, not you, after this Thug Life song came out, everybody has been saying you have been shadow banned. And I saw a few singers putting out saying that, oh, there's nothing like a shadow ban. I've been actually telling Chinmay for some days to please make a list of what she's actually sung post 2018, because if you go to her encyclopedia list, it shows a lot of movies that released post October 2018, right, when she made the revelation, and those were not recorded then. Even a 2020 release could have been a song she recorded 2 years before. So I've been like imploring with her to actually figure out how much she has sung post 2019. Chinmay, how much did your work shrink?
I really see, I'll tell you how it works, especially when you have done a work or a film like Kadale Kadale or a film like 96. I don't think there is any other person who got the opportunity to both be the dubbing artist for the lead heroine and sing all the songs in the film, the female songs, in both Tamil and Telugu. That's what I did with both 96 and Janu. Samantha starred in the Telugu, and in Tamil it was Trisha. Now, usually what happens is that when you have a hit song, as a ripple effect, there'll be a lot of you are in the top of people's minds. Oh, this song worked. So now there is, if you had to look at it in a business sense, there is a market. Or just like how, one film becomes a hit for an actor or an actress, and then they'll get signed up for a few more, things like that. After 96, there was almost no work, and that's usually not how it happens, no matter who it is. You could even have misbehaved on stage as well, but the men will continue to get work. Of course, I got banned. There was a lot of controversy, and I had named the most powerful lyricist in Tamil Nadu. So nobody liked it. Lots of people from the industry were calling me a liar. Other lyricists were saying that, they're doing it for publicity. This is fake. And I don't have to do it for publicity. 96 was the biggest hit of my career at that time. And I was at the peak of my career, the peak of success at that time. And I didn't have to do anything more for anything at all, for any sort of publicity. That song was enough and more publicity. And of course, right after that, COVID happened. We had nobody in the industry was working much. And I know there are composers like Nivas Prasanna and Sam C.S., Govind, also, Ashwin Vinayagamurthy, all of these younger the composers who are in their late 20s, early 30s, they would be fighting with producers because, they'll call me and say, Akka, I really want to work with you, but, the producers don't want to work with you. They're saying, Vanda, not needed. So these are, I sang one song for, Sarvam Talamayam. That was a film that was almost 4 or 5 years in the making. By the time it released in 2019, it was one. I had sung the song when Namuthkumar sir was alive. It was one of his last songs actually. And then the song released much, much, much later, which was like in 2019 or beginning or maybe end of 2018. And that YouTube video, the lyrical video comes out. And if you see the Tamil credits, everybody will be credited. The singer credit will be missing. But in the Telugu, the singer credit will be there. I hadn't sung the Telugu. Sasha had sung it beautifully. So from there, even though they said that, it was inadvertent or something like that, I found it, if you have a template for a singer in Telugu, how can you suddenly not have the same template for the singer in Tamil? So and I was not credited in the YouTube video also until I tweeted about it and said, hey, my name is missing. So after that, I think even though Sarvam Talamayam, Maya, that was for Rahman sir, I think in a sum total, I might have sung about 20 or 25 songs. That's what I can honestly pin it down to. There'll be a lot more songs than that. But a lot of these are what is called as a dubbing song, where the original film is actually made in Telugu or in Malayalam, and then the Tamil dub happens. And so I'm recording it either in Hyderabad or I'm recording it in Kerala. Aadajeevatham was recorded in 2018 beginning, actually. Everybody knows how long that movie was in the making. So a lot of these songs that released much later. I had a song which released after 7 years, I think 2 years ago. And then I saw that there is a song in Garudan, and I said, I don't know when was the last time that I went to, Yuvan Shankar Raja's studio. It is such a long time, at least 5, if not 6 years, because I remember doing it before my babies. I didn't have babies at that time. So I was like, okay, so clearly a lot of the work, has been coming and it's been taking time to release for whatever reasons. But I would definitely bring it down to a sum total of about 20-30 songs. There might be some people who might argue that, people didn't call you because there is no market for you, or nobody really wants you, you're not the in thing, therefore they don't want you. Fair enough. That's a high possibility also. But usually that market or the marketability of a voice and that argument falls flat, especially when there's a blockbuster like 96.
But for somebody for whom singing is second nature, like you said, how difficult was it not being able to sing and also being deprived of your work, something that you made a mark in?
It was extremely difficult. To come back to also what, Dhanya said, she had also noticed, a couple of singers saying, hey, nobody has been banned in singing, there's no such thing like that. So, a lot of them don't even know that there is a ban in the dubbing union, and they don't understand how a ban in the dubbing union means that they will inform the Federation of Film Employees of South India, FEFC, which controls 23 other unions. There are 24 or 25 unions or so that come under the aegis of FEFC. And once, let's say the dubbing union bans somebody, they will inform FEFC. FEFC will put out a circular to all the other unions saying that such and such person has been banned or has been removed from the union based on disciplinary action. In Tamil, they will say, ஒழுங்கு நடவடிக்கையில இவங்களை வந்து தள்ளி வைக்கப்பட்டது, ஒதுக்கு வைக்கப்பட்டது. So, they will give one reminder in that letter itself saying that all members of FEFC and associated unions are reminded that you are all supposed to work only member to member. So, don't work with non-members. Once you get removed from a union, you become a non-member. So they go, the amount of, I think, issues that Mithran faced when he decided to cast my voice in Hero for Kalyani Priyadarshan. And, the team of Lokesh Kanagaraj also, they were constantly, apparently the assistant directors and others were harangued to find out where I was recording, which studio did I dub, so that they couldn't, ban the studio engineer, blacklist the studio. They tried all of this. And I know the engineer, spoke to me and he said, yeah, this happened and we didn't know what to do. And so I had to, imagine not being allowed to work in my own home ground, and I have to work somewhere else and send it and work as if I'm that I'm doing something anti-national or anti-social or something like that. Imagine I am the one having to have to bend over backwards, and people have to bend over backwards to work with me. And then how many people go through all of this extra work and extra, oh God, so much we have to do. Okay, we have to release a film. That is a bigger thing. We'll work when all other issues are sorted. Because when dubbing has happened, the movie is done. People are racing against time to release the film. They don't want to sign up for additional problems at that time.
Little bit explain like how difficult it was job wise, right?
Also financially, for people to understand, no?
Most definitely. So the bulk of my work came from Tamil, and people weren't willing to work with me at all. So as I was the one that will not be touched, will not be worked with. Other singers also, many of them did not want to associate with me, but they were happy to associate with other singers and lyricists who were outed as molesters. That was not a problem. But I was the one who was a troublemaker and would not. So concerts didn't happen, shows didn't happen, recordings didn't happen. Of course, I did get work in Telugu and Kannada and some amount in Malayalam, even Marathi for that matter. But none of the Tamil had almost like fallen silent, where I would probably be recording like some 3-4 songs a month. Maybe I was doing a sum total of probably 7-8 songs a year. And that is significant. That is like a huge dip. And people, the financial constraints of something like this, I faced it, the entire brunt of it. And more, so there was the financial abuse, there was the emotional abuse, there was the all the additional extra abuse that I was getting on social media. So all of this put together, I think it was there were so many times that I was wondering how much longer will this happen? How much longer is this going to continue? Will there never be a light at the end of this tunnel? And when you look up to your own, so many people, as the greats and the seniors, you look up to them, and I remember somebody who I looked up as a mentor. They said Chinmay's cause might be just, but the way she is fighting, none of us will support her. I was like, oh God, it was so tiresome, so tiring in so many ways that, oh God, never mind. But yeah, overall, it is horrible, and this is precisely, I was made an example of that. If you speak up about this is what will happen to you. And there are some singers that I know that will not work with the outed molesters silently. There are some of the female singers who will call me and say, hey, you know what, there's this duet. I didn't know he was going to sing, so I refuse to be a part of it. Again, if you notice, it's the women who are choosing to not be paid and not lose work and take a stand. It costs us. It doesn't cost the men anything. And imagine a woman saying that, out of solidarity, I'll refuse to be paid like some whatever amount of money, 20,000, 50,000, whatever it is. To say I'm not going to be doing it. Once I got to know he's singing, I returned the money. So end of the day, it is a woman who loses both the work, the opportunity, the limelight that could have happened from the song, and the money. Men lose nothing.
So one thing, Pooja, that I have been actually thinking when all these Chinmay's interviews, I started the show asking Chinmay that you are very busy because you're giving interviews. One thing that struck me is that one of the reasons why I believe the Me Too movement in India was not as impactful as it could have been is because it did not get the heft of the Indian mainstream media. Now, that is for many reasons, right? Primary reason is Indian mainstream media is also full of men who can be accused of sexual assault, molestation, harassment. We had so many stories from newsrooms, right? So when there are accusations of about people within the newsroom, you can't be pointing fingers at others. Even some of the people who are interviewing Chinmay during these times, not now, but previously, I've thought, what if those organizations had stood with her, right? I feel like the heft was not provided by the media, which is the reason why the movement also really weakened. And that's the same across languages, but Tamil especially, because maybe of who Vairamuthu was, that a section of the media went beyond their, call of duty to actually rip apart Chinmay.
Actually, in many newsrooms, I have heard, and this is not only in Chinmay's case. When we are hiring reporters, they've actually said, very senior male editors have said, but she is problematic because she has an issue with every small thing. This is a phraseology men use, and when people say not all men, these are the kind of conversations that happen behind the camera.
So I keep
It's
wishing that
really surprised that they don't want to speak up for somebody like Chinmay, right?
yeah, like there are so many normal people on social media who are constantly supporting her, but that has not come with a very decisive voice from the media, I feel. I mean, all of us who are smaller organizations have done their bit. Some of the media, bigger media also has done their bit, but not everybody when they easily could have, because in this case, it was not one. It was almost 5 people who were not even anonymous accounts. The anonymous accounts are separate, which can come up to 12 or 17, whatever. But there were at least 5 women who were non-anonymous, who were speaking about this. Still, nobody was like putting this together and saying, right, that why is this man still there? Chinmay, my last question to you, I mean, if you have any comment on the media, you're free to add. My last question to you is that you did speak about your babies, right? Sometimes I wonder, like, when they grow up and they start reading all this, are you thinking about that also, that you'll have to explain to them at some point, and then would you want to take... You still have to go on, right? You have to outrage about so many different things, but you're also a mother back home. Also to a lot of dogs who will not read.
So I am actually very curious to see how my kids will see this when they are into their teens. And you're a teen mom, so you know how you'll probably give me notes on what to be looking forward to. But I have, I'm really curious to see what my son and daughter will say once they're old enough, and they have a conversation about this with me. How will the world be 10, 12 years down the line? And when we are having a conversation about this, I am really, really looking forward to it. I'm expecting it to be nice, actually. I really am.
Any last words, Leena, especially about what we spoke about, the media coverage?
No, I was also thinking that the kids will really need to learn that what a fighter their mother has been and what it has meant to live that life. So I don't think they would need any external motivational characters to build their life up there, to look up to. But coming to media, I think, everywhere media has reacted the same way to the Me Too movement. If Danya, if you were to remember the first press conference that WCC held together and the kind of heckling that they were met with by Malayalam media, really was a scarring moment of television journalism for me. I still remember how vicious the crowd was, how they were shouting at them, and this was like a big panel of some 20 big names in the industry, very senior, very proven artists coming and speaking truth to media and how they reacted. So I think men with very patriarchal notions, enabled abusers, holding power within the industry is what rules inside media too. And that is the kind of inside jokes they make about the women colleagues and all of that. Media is not not at all a great place to work back then. And I think slowly with the Me Too movement and kind of a reckoning and the kind of conversations that it has enabled, things might have slightly changed, or maybe in new media spaces that we occupy, things have vastly changed the kind of conversation that it holds. But this kind of sexist men or this kind of abusive men in mainstream media is a very common occurrence, and they have not been called out. And from those kind of newsrooms to expect any kind of support and solidarity, I think is really asking for a lot.
Okay, so we'll end the discussion here. Then we'll read the letters. It's been a busy day for Chinmayi, but we told her we have to do the recording. So actually, we're recording at 9 p.m. in the night. Thank you very much, Chinmayi, for coming to South Central.
Thank you, Dhanya. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much, Leena. And truly, truly grateful for your time.
Okay, so that was a deep conversation with Chinmay. Now I'm going to read out a few letters from mostly our subscribers. You can all write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com, and know that if you write a letter, most probably we'll read it out. If you do not want it to be read out, please mention that specifically. Santosh Kumar writes about the RCB tragedy. So many people turned up to celebrate a club's victory on a weekday in a city like Bangalore. Bengaluru is amazing. As per newspaper reports, a large chunk came from outside city. That means they have nothing to do or they came to have fun, because it can't be all cricket fans. He's saying it's a sad state of affairs. In the past 10 years, we have forgotten to take the streets for our rights. This is not ignoring that Bengaluru had mass protests during the time of CAA, but generally we have become insensitive to issues that concern our very existence. Instead, we find pleasure in celebrating a cricket club's victory.
But I think RCB is a lot more than a cricketing club.
What is it, Pooja?
I'm sorry.
It is a cricket club.
I'm not denying that it's a cricket club, but the sentiments associated with RCB was a sense of belongingness.
I agree with Santosh.
Which is-
People can have more sentiments when there is a protest happening.
But
which
you
is
can't dictate to people what you want to be attached to. You can suggest.
Of course, yes. But I
right?
just wish.
Of course.
Like, I remember going for this one protest and there were just 10 people. This is the first time I went for a protest, because normally I do not go. I only go as a journalist. And I felt like, why are more people not here?
By the way, just a quick point here. In the conversations we had, the police apparently differentiated, saying this is not a hostile crowd. It's not a protest crowd, so they allowed. So that's another thing.
Okay, Raman says, the discussion RCB victory celebration tragedy, which was last week, was deeply insightful. Our obsession with stars, brands and even events such as marriage functions and political rallies for that matter often comes at the expense of basic safety protocol. The careless use of terms like parade and roadshow without clear definitions of understanding only adds to the confusion and mismanagement. What should have been a moment of collective joy was overshadowed by a tragedy. He says on the issue of actor Kamal Hassan's remarks, Professor Billimale his explanation of the linguistic and cultural landscape of South India was illuminating. Leena's observations on justice and the possibility that such controversies may be deliberately stirred were both sharp and thought-provoking. Together, the panel offered a thoughtful, layered perspective. Finally, Dhanya's opening pitch was very persuasive, and I hope it achieved its desired effect. My opening pitch was this, that what does 500 rupees a month mean to you? Because it means to a lot to us. So if you're still listening, go click on that link or scan the QR code and become a subscriber. I just want to say one thing. A lot of people wrote to us saying that, why didn't you have a Tamil expert? There were a couple of reasons why, because a stampede just sort of, change everything that we were supposed to discuss. And I also don't want to play South Central as this podcast where for and against will come, right? Sometimes we may not agree with it, but we do have to listen. We can pitch in and disagree, but we have to listen. That's one reason why we call Mohandas Pai. Billimale, of course, Professor Billimale can be opposed, saying that no, there are Tamils who believe that Tamil did come first and Kannada came with Tamil. But the point is to also listen to him.
But I have to add, the reason we also chose Professor Purushottama Billimale is he's a reasonable voice. He's not a fanatic. And he came from a perspective of expertise, which he's also come to after speaking to a lot of linguists, including Tamil linguists. So it wasn't some perspective. It is his research after years of studying.
No, I'm saying even that can be opposed by somebody else, right? But that's what we want South Central to be. You have to listen to somebody like Professor Billimale. Now, if you want to then go on to social media and outrage that his stand was not right, we want this show to really motivate you to research more. Then you should go up, read what Annamalai University's research was, and you have to counter him saying that that is not factual. So I think we have to inspire people to really read up more and to understand than to just, this Twitter outrage. Now, this is a very thoughtful letter. The person told me to read it out as anonymous. So I'm going to read it out as anonymous. I heard the latest episode 29 and I have few thoughts. The episode before this. First, about the Harry Potter. This is the one where we discussed how to separate the art and the artist. So Anonymous says about Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. I've also grown up reading Harry Potter. I'm 25 today. I started when I was 13. I have read Harry Potter books in entirety every single year since then because of how amazing it is. I'm also someone who identifies as LGBTQ+, and I've admired J.K. Rowling forever before her statements. But in J.K. Rowling's case, the art came a lot before the public statements. Hence, it's easier to differentiate the two. As you might be aware, J.K. Rowling's history of working with Amnesty International, her experiences that she spelled out in her Harvard commencement speech, I feel like she's an old woman stuck in the past and marred by her local Britain-based issues when it comes to women and trans women. So he says, I also struggle sometimes and question myself, why do I like Harry Potter so much? But I think there's a distinction between the art, level of art as well. Salman Khan movies and Harry Potter series are incomparable. Also, the crimes are incomparable. J.K. Rowling has given statements. Dileep is actually accused of orchestrating sexual harassment, and Salman Khan has committed domestic violence. These two, according to Anonymous, is not actually comparable.
So we were just having this conversation before the episode with a colleague, and all of us, by the way, here are fans of Harry Potter. Many of us, like we mentioned in that episode, grew up. So I think why we find it more difficult to disown J.K. Rowling is a lot of our own childhood memories are closely associated, so it's harder. But the point the colleague was making was, inciting hate could be even more dangerous than physical violence. That's one perspective. I don't know where you stand on it. Do write to us and tell us what you think of that.
I just want to tell Pooja, I was not a child when I read the first Harry Potter.
You're
I mean, it released in 1997, but by the time we got the books, I was not
so
a child
old.
anymore. Sorry. No, but I think this is very important, right? All of us are seeing this very differently. There are so many times we end up watching art or admiring art and we do not even know how problematic the person is. But once we know, then how do we judge it? This is a very personal question. I don't think there's a formula for everyone. Okay, this one I want you to come in, Leena. Aravind Tyagarajan says, it was disappointing not to see an alternate view taken yet again on a discussion as broad as separating art from the artist. South Central needs to open a window out of this echo chamber. T.M. Krishna, while vehemently indicating they need not be separated, eventually took what's possibly the only nuanced position, which is to continue to have the difficult conversation and look to engage even with all of those that one may not agree with. It is indeed possible to separate the art from the artist. The lines of separation are unfortunately proportional to those that are deeply affected through specific and personal experiences. Anyway, his main problem is that does T.M. Krishna want all his Rasikas to not only be those that fully agree with his politics and activism, what of several of them who I know personally that enjoy his renditions while having deep resentment to some of his writings? This would have been a wonderful question to ask him. Also, does TNM only want subscribers who fully agree with editorial positions?
Before you go across to Leena, I just wanted to say, we don't vet and curate opinions before we call them. It so happened that T.M. Krishna and Anna Vetikat's position on some of the elements, it was a very nuanced, layered conversation. On some points, they converged. They disagreed on some others. And the reason why T.M. Krishna later changed his position, I wouldn't even say changed, but came up with an alternative point of view is exactly the reason why we have this podcast, that we don't come with black and white and shove our opinions down your throat. It's a conversation that is meant to be thought-provoking. You may agree, may not agree.
Also, Arvind, I want to put a counterpoint to you that, look, our media is filled with the other side, right? I'm sorry, like most of the discussions, I find the media on the wrong side mostly, and they're just pitting one against the other. That's not the whole point here. And does TNM want only subscribers who fully agree with its editorial positions? No, we want all kinds of people to read us. Subscribe. Of course, I can't ask somebody who really hates our work to spare 500 rupees per month.
But do so that you can read what we are writing.
About
Otherwise, you won't know.
Yeah. No, I would enjoy, I actually enjoy some of the mails which are abusing us, saying you anti-national vermins, what are you writing and all that. But I'm glad that they're reading this, right? That's fine. We don't want everybody to agree. And I personally did not know what T.M. Krishna is going to say. I did not have any discussion with him. I simply said, we have a podcast. Do you want to come? Leena, you want to add something?
No, I am of the opinion that if you think by a few people taking a cause that is right and just and arguing for it is an echo chamber that you don't agree with it, then so be it. But I don't think that having someone who thinks that while artists that they can enjoy them while separating the art from the artist is well. When I was talking about J.K. Rowling, I did in the end talk about this, that how difficult I found it. And the previous writer to you said that while Salman Khan and the other person were themselves abusers, J.K. Rowling is just taking a position. But I thought J.K. Rowling, as an internationally renowned voice and who has sort of influenced countless young adults, kids and young adults, and shaped their thoughts, I think has a very more important position than what the other two abusers that we discussed. So her position that is filled with hatred to people who don't belong to the binary binary defined gender notions is a deeply problematic position, because it puts a lot of people's life at risk. So, well, if Anna and T.M. Krishna and all of us sort of agreed to that one position, I don't think that we need to be apologetic for it in any which way. That is so. The position is so, and that is how we all felt about it, and that is so.
Okay, Sunil NM writes on the subject about cauliflower reference to BJP. I think that's the episode where Seema Chishti had come. I think two major points were worth mentioning. Firstly, they are equating war against Maoist terrorists to communal pogrom against hapless Muslims. Secondly, they are seeing the action by Indian security forces and that by Hindutva forces on the same vein. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Basically, that we should not have overlooked these two things. Final letter, Pramod Biligeri says, your discussion segment about police brutality was terrific. I wasn't expecting that topic to interest me, but the depth and variety of views got me hooked. Even the police salary and working hours weren't missed. My view is that people get fed up with so much rule breaking and lawlessness in India that their desperation makes them condone police excesses. That is true. Nobody's disagreeing with you. That's why people are like, anyway, this person is not going to go to jail, so let them just get thrashed while in custody for a few days. I do have more letters, but I can't take it up now. I just want to say a lot of men listening to the podcast write to us, but I really wish more women wrote back to us, especially after this episode. So remember, it's South Central at thenewsminute.com. We'll quickly go to recommendations very, very fast. Yes.
So I know there's a lot of talk about the BBC Hindi documentary about the Kumbh Stampede. A good time to also be talking about Stampede. But I want to kind of re-up our partner organization, News Laundry's investigation, which came in Feb. I think on the 4th or 5th of February, months ago, a small organization was there on the ground bringing investigative journalism that others didn't. So Basant Kumar had a report which revealed that at least 79 people died in Kumbh, not 36 as the UP government was claiming. So I do hope that you go back and watch and read that report.
So for my recommendations this week, for reading, I suggest that you get a subscription of the News Minute. I am also a subscriber. For music, do listen to the violin of Samuel Ervinian, I think. I hope I'm getting his second name right.
So since I am lucky to shoot this from the comfort of my home, I pulled out something from my library, a book that I really love. This is How You Lose Her by Junot Diaz.
Okay, my recommendation is a book which I have not finished. Actually, I'm not finishing a lot of books these days because I just want to somehow, for recommendation, at least finish 150 pages. But I like this book. It's called Tyranny of Merit. It's by Michael Sandel. It's not a new book. It was written in 2020. So before Trump's recent win. But there's an American philosopher who looks like at the tyranny of merit. We talk about caste and tyranny of merit here. There he says the American dream itself is somehow telling people that merit will win when you're humiliating a lot of other people who do not win. It's not a very thick book. When you say philosopher, political philosopher sounds very heavy, but it's not. Do buy that book. Nandini?
I'd like to recommend an article that appeared in Scroll. They have it's called How Colleges in India Bribe Assessors to Get Higher Grades. I think it's a very, very important story because a lot of parents look at NAC ratings for these colleges and decide where they have to enroll their children. And this article, outlines how easy it is to bribe, and it has become institutionalized now. Nobody even bothers. So please do read. Please become aware. Yeah, so good.
So because you spoke about credit ratings, I have been saying from the beginning, go to Spotify, go to any other podcast platform and give us ratings. We are not trying to bribe anybody or change the rating.
I did not see that coming.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, we are not like NAC. We are not giving wrong accreditations or credits here. Please go and give ratings. That's the only way apparently more people will discover podcasts on Spotify, Apple, etc. Okay, so that's a wrap. Thank you to my producer, Bhuvan Malik. Thank you to production assistant Ajay. Thank you to our editor Jasim Ali, who has a tough time because this feed will reach him at midnight. Thank you to Sukanya Shaji, who's listening in and taking down notes diligently. It is not AI that we are using. And finally, thanks to Yana Choksi, who is our social media head. Thank you all for listening in.